Hello, Emma.
Hi, Jamie. Morning.
Um, this is our first attempt at um, creating a sort of podcast and YouTube series to one, help other people who are starting out in constellations and systemic work to sort of get an understanding of what it takes to run a practice, but also kind of understand a bit more around collaborations, working together in this field that we're all in together. And so I thought of you as somebody to talk to about this because we have a sort of relationship through generative work, which is more of a kind of just being in the same place at the same time. And I was really curious about getting to know you, and maybe as we do that, recording it so that we can share some of our work with other people as well.
Lovely. I'm really happy. I'm all about community, and so is this work. So
Yeah.
it's great that you're doing this.
And one of the things for me when I'm talking to other people about constellations work is some people have had experiences with constellations before, some people haven't. And one of the things that I say to people is, which I learned from Judith, was everybody is slightly different. Everybody has their own flavors, their textures, which is based on their history, their learning. And so maybe we could do both do an intro to each other and to our audience about the flavors of systemic work that we offer and how we came to those textures. Are you up for starting?
I'm definitely up for starting, and I'm. It's something that I've always noticed. Judith, being a teacher, has one approach, and when I worked with Stefan Hausner, who came in as a homeopath and not a psychotherapist, I found him much harsher because he didn't have that psychotherapy kind of compassion training, and I found some of his work a bit brutal. I've come up through the self-development movement, so I discovered the sort of big 1990s group therapy workshops, and that was my first intro into self-development work. And I actually discovered constellations as a journalist. So my first experience was with Judith Hemming, who I approached as the leader in the UK to write an article about 20 years ago now, something like that. So I'd run self-esteem enhancement workshops. I'd been a self-development journalist. I was experiencing lots of different modalities to write about and share. And I was also working as an image consultant, which is very much about discovering who we are as opposed to dressing our kind of I'm an accountant, I'm a mother type scenario. And subsequently training as a psychotherapist. So I've got a sort of mixture of things, but I would say I'm incredibly influenced by Judith Hemming, who, having done that first workshop, I then sort of sat at her feet effectively for another 10 years, attending every workshop I could. And I know lots of new constellators. You can see their teacher. And I remember, another one of my teachers going, oh, I can see Judith in her. And then as she progressed, she became more of herself. So I don't know, really. You'd have to look at me and see what you could see. It's hard maybe to tell you if I'm like anybody or I'm like myself. But my
Oh,
sister,
really?
I have a twin sister, and she said, I was talking about why, certain reactions people had to me. And she said, yes, but darling, even when you're being really compassionate, you're like a laser beam. So I think I really like to get to the source of things. And I love this work I hate secrets. And I like to uncover secrets. So that's not always allowed in constellations. Sometimes there are secrets that are not our business. We have to leave them be. But if there are ones that harm us, I'm really all about supporting people to get to the truth of things.
I also started with Judith. I came to constellations through doing some youth climate work in Bath, and I met a head teacher who introduced me to Jane James and Terry Ingham, and they then sort of took me under their wing and I was introduced to ECL, which is the sort of educational constellations community that is European and South African and then Namibian. And I did the last Colpi that Judith trained, and did that with 2 young children and my partner in tow, which was an incredibly intense experience. And then from there, I sort of just became part of the field. I sort of went to Judith's workshops, and then sort of moved to more locally based work. And I was in ongoing group with Gay. And from there, it's just become part of how I see the world. I think that's one of the things with systemic work is that it's not just that you do the training and then you're a systemic constellator. It just has an effect that keeps on going. It's a way that you see things when people speak to you. And so when COVID happened, me and my kids sort of stayed at home. We had a lovely time. And then emerging from that, I did the foundation training and the applied training. And then started my own constellations practice because I was like, okay, actually, I've been doing this for a long time and I'm ready. And it was a funny experience because I always thought it would be my sort of grandfather practice, like I'd be doing this in my 60s, 70s, 80s and beyond. But actually, it felt like a good time to start now. And I've been noticing that my orientation is also to include sort of ecological work and animist views, which I've been sort of part of for a long time as well, and which stemmed from doing Vipassana meditation and Buddhist practices, and being involved in sort of ecological work.
Did you know I used to work for the Green Party?
I didn't.
Yeah, spent 3 years working for the Green Party, got Caroline Lucas elected as the head of comms for the team in Brighton. There we are, another connection between us.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I was interested to speak to you about was, as somebody who's been sort of in this work for a while and is outwardly running workshops in multiple locations, and offering a sort of multitude of things. It's not just the constellations workshops that you offer other work and retreat work as well. I thought it would be really interesting to talk about what sort of moves you to like choose a place to start constellating in and running workshops. What rhythms do you choose? As in, do you do it once a month, every other month? How do you communicate with people in multiple different locations? I'm really curious about like how people find you.
Well, I'm lucky in that I've got a strong working relationship with an organisation called the Hoffman Institute that run a 7-day self-development programme. Formed again because I wrote about them many years ago and I loved the work. And my husband's a teacher and together we run courses for them. So we run relationship courses for them and Hoffman process retreats as well. So that's I've already got people that I've worked with, people that know me, people that are interested in self-development work. So that's been really helpful to have a pool of people that go, I know Emma, I trust Emma. If she says this is great, I want to do it. So that's a great advantage. And the reason I choose the locations is, firstly, I want this work to be spread far and wide. And I have, as I said, I worked in Brighton for a long time and lived there, but there are an awful lot of constellators in that area and they're doing a great job and we don't need another one in Brighton. So I really looked at, well, where is the nobody? And thought, okay, I'll go there, because part of it is, yes, I would like people to come on my workshops, but also just sort of sticking a flag in the ground and going, this is going on here. Then for people that maybe are only looking around those areas to see it, go, oh, I've heard about that, but they mightn't be as enthusiastic enough to travel to London or to, you know, Bath or something, but would try it out, coming to somewhere close to them. That was part of my reasoning. And I'm quite surprised to discover that my workshop next weekend in Chelmsford in Essex is, I sold all my issue holder places, the sort of quickest of anywhere. And you wouldn't say that Chelmsford was a particular epicenter of mind, body, spirit work, but, you know, but there we are. So, yeah.
That's really exciting. I've been thinking about it since I sort of talked to you last time about the different places that you're locating the work in. And I mean, I'm working in Bath because it suits me and my family life and my responsibilities. And there aren't that many other people doing it in Bath. There are in Frome because Barbara Morgan's there, and there's a whole another school of work around it there. But I was also this year planning to run some workshops in Weston-super-Mare. A friend invited me to do some teaching on the counselling and psychotherapy course there, and it reminded me, actually, my grandparents retired there. I have many memories of growing up in Weston-super-Mare as well, and so there's this sort of familial connection there that also feels really resonant for me. And then similarly, sort of taking the work to Cornwall and around Redruth, where my mum and my sister now live. And so I'm sort of orientating myself around, you know, a similar bit of like, you know, where aren't there other people doing this work? But also, where do I have a connection to the land and people and family with? And so that feels like over the next couple of years, really just sinking into those three places as places to work.
I think that's a great idea, because what I've noticed from traveling is I need to be in a very present state to do a good job. And if I'm having to get up early and drive somewhere I've never been before and set up and get the space sort of energetically how I like it, and it's really demanding on me. So, you know, I have parents that are near Cambridge, so I can stay with them the night before to get to Chelmsford, for instance. So I think it is, you know, just from practical terms and to do the best job we can, you know, as new constellators setting up, you know, a long way from home, I think it would be incredibly challenging. So I think it's lovely to go where there's family that you can sort of go to before and just start out from there.
The other direction that I wanted to talk about was pricing, because I think it's one of the other really interesting things that I've noticed in starting out. Like, what do you price in your first year? How do you sort of place yourself within the variety of other experienced constellators? And then as I sort of enter this second year with a new pricing structure and a different way of doing it, and looking at other people doing similar work, and some people sort of moving direction from family constellations to doing more sort of leadership and organizational work so that they can essentially afford to be a constellator. Like, I think it's a really interesting topic to talk about in the field. And I'm just wondering, like, how did you find your way of landing on pricing structures that I notice are varied as well? And so that's another kind of really interesting, like, oh, I'm curious about that.
And it is something that I've talked to other constellators about, and we all, it's something we all ponder. So I chose mine. I'm not sure it's correct, because sometimes I've lost money and that doesn't feel like a reasonable exchange for my time and energy. I've had to consider what I earn on other workshops. So I run relationship workshops, and I do notice that because I love constellations, I will quite happily do a day's work for, you know, far less than I'd get for relationships and feel much happier about. So there's got to be something of like, I really like doing constellation work, and so I'm happier with a different pay scale. But I originally just thought I would make it easier for my clients by charging the same price if they were coming for a one-on-one session for an hour, or if they were coming for the other work I do, shamanic work or coaching or that sort of thing. So I just did it all at a flat rate. I thought £60 an hour is what I charge for the one-on-one work I do with people. And so I will charge £60 for a constellation because, you know, we might roughly say it takes an hour, and then it's easier for my customer to go, what shall I choose? Shall I do this or shall I do that? Having said that, you know, obviously I'm paying for a venue and I'm paying to get places and all the rest of it. So I'm not sure. But the other issue, of course, is around the whole issue holder versus representative pricing.
Yeah.
And I've watched experienced constellators dance between one price for all and choosing who has an issue in the moment, and then having to manage people's disappointment if they really wanted to bring an issue but then didn't, but had paid the same as somebody who did. And also that I want to be able to offer free places to people that I would like to have on my workshop. And that can be trainee constellators or experienced psychotherapists bringing a client. You know, the client, if they want their therapist to come, they're already having to pay the therapist. So I like, well, that's sort of, I'm good with having that free. So, and also I want people, if they're coming to bring an issue, I would really like them to have experienced a workshop as a representative once, at least beforehand, because I think that allows them to trust what they see more. When I've had people come straight in doing an issue, never seen it before, they go, but how can you say that? And how can you know that to somebody representing their, I don't know, partner, their mother, their father, whatever. And so I think it's important for people to be a representative first. And then if that's the case, how do I justify that? I'm going, you have to do this thing where you may or may not get much out of it. And I personally believe that people get a huge amount out of being a representative. And I've had representative roles. In fact, one of the pieces of work that was so impactful and I've never forgotten, I wasn't even a representative. I was in the holding circle. The issue was so close to one that we have in my family that I was sure I'd get chosen. But then it became a very male line constellation. So the issue holder was male. His grandfather had had the same fate as my grandfather. I'd almost going to be bringing that issue myself. I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to be working. I'll sit here waiting for him to choose me. And the facilitator said, choose somebody to represent your father, your grandfather, your great-grandfather. So clearly I wasn't going to get picked for those. But then the last person in this male line's leg touched my leg as me sitting in the circle. I spent the entire constellation howling, tears howling. And the facilitator, which was Judith, afterwards said, Emma, you were representing all the wives that were left bereft. It was a war story. And I was like, yes, of course I was. That's been a story in my life. I've got a strong connection with a grandfather that was killed in the war, left my father, you know, fatherless, aged 3, and seen how those patterns have impacted me and our family. So it's like absolutely appropriate. And I wasn't even selected as a rep, and that was very, very impactful, that constellation. But how to explain that to a client that's looking first time, shall I come? How much does this cost? How much do I have to pay? Oh, I have to pay this first and then this. Yeah, it's a difficult question. What have your thoughts around it been?
Yeah, I just say one thing connected to what you're saying, because somebody said to me once after a constellation, they said, oh, it's like doing 6 or 7 therapy sessions. And I was like, yes, that's exactly what it's like. But you can't charge like that because people don't understand that that's what you're doing, basically. Yeah, so the first year I started working with a model that me and some friends developed over COVID times, which was sort of gift, shared, and appropriate economy pricing. So, you know, it allows for people to self-select what they want to pay, and it went from £20, £50, and £75. And the idea was that I also didn't say there wasn't a price for being a representative or an issue holder. It was all the same, but people could choose what price they wanted to come in at. One of the things that I learned from that first year is that there were a few people that paid 20 and then didn't come. And so, you know, there's this whole relationship dynamic between what now another friend and I are calling a sort of curious and committed pricing structure, which is that if you're curious and it's too low, then you can not show up because
the only people that don't show are the people that have taken free places. They're the only ones that ever don't show.
Yeah. So those are, and I think mostly it's from feedback from people, it's mostly to do with fear. Like, you know, they haven't paid enough to get over the fear line of attending. So that, I think that's really curious. This year I've gone for a sort of different mode, which is that so it's a flat rate still, and I'm charging £135, and doing it so that if people book earlier and take the anxiety out of it for me, then they get a 25% gift. But equally, knowing what I know from the first year of constellating is that a lot of people just book at the last minute, and that is part of the practice of running workshops, is that you just have to trust that if you're committed to showing up, then other people will show up. And then I've got a relational pricing, which is that if you are up for constellating over the course of a year and you want to come to 4 workshops, then you just pay an annual price, which you can also pay monthly. And so that's £350, and that does 4 workshops. And then the way that would work for CSE graduates or other constellators from other schools is that if you want to come to any workshop, you can just pay that flat rate and do as many workshops as you want over the year.
Do people pick you up on that?
So I've just literally started it now, and I'm just starting to communicate it. So I will let you know in a few months' time.
Yeah, because I did somebody suggest a business coach who I had a kind of just a chat with once. She said, "Oh, sell programs, do it as a." So I did put on my website, you know, 6 sessions, be it 1-to-1, issue holder, whatever. So would it be like 6 sixes, 360, but then priced it at, I don't know, 2 something, for instance. But I haven't made much of it. It's not on the top of my website, and nobody's ever had a look at it and said, "I'll take that one, please." So
yeah. And I think it's new to the like I don't know many constellators doing that, and so there's a sort of newness about it, and it sort of has emerged from a place of noticing that in my first year starting out, a lot of the people who came were people that I knew, people who understood what constellations work was, people that wanted to do it as a not just a one-off thing, but as a bit of a practice as well. And this year, thinking about moving forwards, I'm like, do you know, it would be really nice to have a regular group of ongoing people who just dip in and out over the year. And then I can focus on building more relationships with people who don't understand and know the work. And that feels like I feel like it's an experiment. It's like, you know, let's see what happens at the end of this year, and have I been able to communicate it well enough for people to understand, and, you know, do people enjoy it as a regular ongoing practice of hanging out with ancestors, which is what I think is one of the ways of describing it.
Yeah, I mean, I do have a core little group of people that found me on Eventbrite or Instagram or whatever, that now show up really regularly. Maybe I do some short evening sessions too, where we just do 1 or 2 constellations that kind of are there every other time, that sort of thing. So, you know, it does build those keen followers that just love the work and are happy to to look at every issue they've got in their life through a systemic lens.
Yeah.
And there are others that just think, oh, it can only be because I've had an argument with my dad or whatever.
Yeah. So that was going to lead me on to asking you about theming. Because I noticed you do theme some of your workshops as well, and I have.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so
don't
there
think
was, I
I've
noticed the money and me one. And
Oh, yes, you're
I
right.
noticed,
That is my first one.
yes,
Yes.
and that sometimes in the way that you articulate through some of the bits on Instagram and stuff that I've seen is that you're, even if you don't necessarily theme it in the thing, you might theme it in the marketing or the sharing of the work. And so I'm really, I'd love to know how that works. And yeah.
Yeah, I set for this year, I just chose a number of venues, put them out as personal issues workshops, and I'm working through those. And it's something I'm thinking about because there are things that I know a lot about, as it might be how we choose to present ourselves visually to the world, what we dress ourselves in, the issues around how we think we can be seen, how we think we should be seen. And of course, all of those carry huge amounts of family beliefs about what it's okay to look like, what it's not okay to look like, what people in our family look like, where we've been judged as little boys and girls for choosing a thing that we thought was heaven and just subtly picking up the messages of disapproval or approval around those choices. And so that's an area I'd really love to do more work in. But I've been anxious about, well, have I got enough of a core client base to do that, to fill a workshop like that, or should I make it more general? And then I've asked myself, but if I was really clear about it and said, this is what it's on, people that mightn't have thought about coming to constellations, but knew they had an issue around their self-image, their body image, that they'd looked at other things and thought, gosh, I'd never thought of it being something I could do as a constellation, but now I've seen this, yes, I will. And yes, I don't know, because I do, because I run relationship workshops with Matthew, my husband, and we do one in France each summer, which is, we do the morning of our standard relationship workshop, and then in the afternoon we do constellations. And every either individual or couple that come gets a chance to do a constellation around a key relationship issue. That has been absolutely wonderful. I mean, partly because it's been lovely because it's introduced people to the work that they were coming to work on their relationship, and they've just got a whole new sense of what's going on, or the families they've brought in, or the dynamics that are causing this, maybe core struggle they've got that's based in, her family of origin from one country and his from another, or whatever it might be. So those are incredibly rewarding because I think I can go there's depth to the work that maybe I don't get on a one-day personal issues where we're looking at a lot of different things. Also being on a 3-day retreat, so the connection between the group, there's huge amounts of trust. So the work has been incredibly profound. I've actually had to watch myself because one of the pieces of work was so massive that I needed like 3 osteopathy sessions afterwards because it just so impacted my body. But I'm kind of up for that work. I love the deep stuff. So yeah, in the right time and space, it can be amazing. But yeah, I don't know. Wouldn't want to exclude somebody that's like desperate for a bit of help. Like, oh, I can't come to that because she's doing it on relationships and got something about,
Yeah.
Money, for instance.
Yeah. Yeah, it's reminding me of the sort of one of the things I was working with some young people yesterday to help them design a process for a festival. It was a game, but I was reflecting on how much structure, like when do you need structure basically? you know, the structure of like, this is what this is about. And how do you have spaciousness so that, if you know, it's not about anything in particular, but it is a process that holds you in terms of systemic constellations work. Because it is, there's so many different directions you can come to the work, right? And that there isn't a right or a wrong direction. You know, I had a workshop at the end of the year, and you know, we started with a sort of female line, and then went to just like a female line going back generations, and then we went to another constellation which was literally just that family, and working out some of those family dynamics to looking at a health issue. And so, you know, and constellating body parts, and then seeing how that unfolded into people within the system. And so, you know, just there's so many different ways to come to it. And it's quite hard when somebody says, hey, can you tell me about constellations work? You're just like, well, where should I start? Like, you know.
I wrote the articles. I mean, as I said, I discovered it to write an article for Judith, and then I did another one for Kindred Spirit afterwards that then had to be different. And it was just about the hardest subject I've ever had to write about, because it sounds so bonkers. Okay, well, how would you know? How could you speak, and how could you know what, you know, did you have to be psychic to do this work? And I'm like, no, I don't know how it works, but I've seen time and again people stand and they've got an opinion about the person next to them or the person across the room or something out of the window, and we don't know. And it's just so hard to hold those two things. We don't know how it works. It does work. Yeah, really hard to share. And my experience is that most people have come because a friend has said, you've got to do this, and they trust the friend.
Yeah. Where do you think this work might take you? And I'm going to slightly expand that into a sort of collective sense of where do you think this work might take us? Because I think one of the, again, orientations that I have for this work is that if we're, you know, there's the field of personal healing, which is what we, you know, when we're doing therapy work or one-to-one work, you know, that's what we're often working on, is ourselves. But actually, I think constellations as a practice is collective healing, because when you have the group of people that come to any one workshop, you know, you're working on that personal level, but actually what's happening is that everybody pretty much that comes into the room, they're like, oh yeah, that piece of work could be mine work, that connects. And so when people leave at the end of the day, you've kind of gone from being however many strangers in a room together to this deep, interconnected, timeless relationship. And for
even
me,
when you
as
come
somebody,
back 5 years later, I see
yes,
somebody and it was like, oh my God, that's the person that represented my, you know, miscarried baby.
yeah,
And I have this bond to them. And a part of, I don't know if a part of my baby is in them or there's something in them that resonates, but there's a connection that doesn't go. Like years later, you'll see them go, oh, that was that guy that I did that one with. And yeah, it really is true.
How do you feel it is for you as a sort of collective, communal pattern or process of connecting us more deeply?
Well, I'm very heartened by what I see in Germany. So I'm there a couple of times a year. One of my teachers is based in Berlin, so I'm over there doing various trainings. And most of the people, a lot of the people there are German. And of course, Bert Hellinger was German, so this is where it started. And it's so much more known in Germany that they're really intrigued that we're having to have these kind of conversations about how do you reach people, how do you explain it? Because over there it's understood in the same way as, you know, I'm going to go and do I don't know, what would it be? Like something really obvious. So I'm doing counseling, you know, people go, oh, okay. In Germany, you can go, I'm doing constellation. People go, okay, there's none of this. Like, oh, what's that? Is that about astrology? No. Thing that we have to go through. So I really hope that the more of these kind of conversations that can be had, the more people that train, the more people that do it, that it becomes a familiar and understood way to disentangle the problems we face individually, in families and in society. I hope it goes that way. And because I have a place in a retreat center in France, I would really like, I mean, it's very odd that I kept trying to get constellators to come out and do workshops, and they never seemed to come off. And then a few years ago, I thought, oh, it's because I'm meant to. You know, I tried to get really big, old, famous, good constellators out there, and it just, you know, the stars never aligned. And then I thought, oh, maybe it's because I'm meant to be doing them. And I would like to, which would also be lovely because there's so few in France. It really, if there's few constellators in England, there's hardly any in France. And I would like to be able to sort of spread it. I want to be able to spread this work. For me, it's just been such an incredible resource to me. It's my absolute go-to when there's something that I'm up against that I can't disentangle myself. It's my first point of call for any issue I face in my life. And I really believe in it and trust in it. And I would like other people to be able to have that resource too. So yeah, that's my wish, that we become more German about it, or Dutch.
Thanks. I was thinking about because obviously we hadn't spoken about that before, but Helena is a sort of person who brought many things together to kind of create the family constellations process, and then everything that spawned off of that as well. And I was thinking about the sort of relationship to him being a missionary in Africa and learning from the Zulu, and the sort of relational element of being a relationship with all things and all beings and ancestors, and how for me that like systemic constellations work is one of the practices that is out there that I have found and really love and appreciate, that helps us come into greater contact with like the flow of spirit and the flow and the movement of earth, and like beyond any human constructions of systems and collectives and ways of being, but that actually there's this sort of deeper river or ocean that is, you know, that we're all connected to, that connects us all as well, and that somehow that reminds us that we're all related.
Yeah. Yes.
Is there anything you would like to say to check out?
No, it's been lovely to talk to you. Thank you for taking the initiative on this. And yeah, I just hope this can develop into a community of constellators. I tried to set up a sort of peer support group around me, but there just weren't enough people to get it off the ground. But if we could do something, be part of something, that would be lovely in a slightly different way. Yeah, it's lovely to speak to you today.
Thanks. And thanks. It's a kind of one of those conversations where you have a starting point, but you don't know where it's going to go. But I feel really like soft and grateful and appreciative for your time and for this conversation. So thank you.
Jamie, really welcome.